Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
We're usually good afternooning. This is a different time for us.
Totally. Yes, I thought about that when I looked at my calendar. Like, I've got nothing. Yes, I do. And it's
Yeah,
first thing, kind of.
yeah. And my hair is usually not wet when we record.
I wouldn't have even,
That's fine.
didn't even need to out yourself. I
No,
wouldn't have.
just looks greasy.
No, I
It's
just
wet,
think you
water
look
wet.
fashionable.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it hasn't frizzed out yet. Okay, so we have a few things I think we're going to touch on, but one of the things I thought would be fun to chat about is influencer events. Because obviously with COVID, those were not a thing for
Mm,
a while. They used to be all the rage. And now I see them coming back in all of their various iterations. And I actually think that anytime you can bring people together with a brand to experience something, like it's just so great to have that in person experience with anything. I mean, it's why we go to
yes.
conferences, right?
Right.
So I just kind of wanted to talk through like the different, like the evolution of influencer events and which ones we like, which ones maybe we don't, what we
Mm,
think makes sense for who, and
right.
all the things.
Well, and when you first brought up the topic, I'll admit my mind went to influencer conferences, influencer, when you said events.
Okay.
So clarify a little bit more, like, are there examples of things you're seeing out there? Because what I think you're saying is experiential
Were you thinking of
influencer campaigns.
like Mom Too and Blog Her and that sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay. No, that's I mean, man, I used to love going to those. But no, I'm talking about like
When a brand owns it.
when, yeah, but I mean, the favorite ones that we have always done at Sway Group are the ones that almost feel like a house party.
Mm,
So, like, gosh, going way, way back, I remember we did a set of them we did, well, we've done them a few different ways. So, like, we were doing something for Graco car seats, and we did two types of events for Graco. One, we had women with babies the ages of the car seats and the swings and all of that. And we would have, actually, I hosted one at my house because I had a little one. So we like had the swing there, and then we had a parenting expert and someone from Graco, and I have invited a bunch of other moms over, most of whom were influencers, and everyone watched a little presentation by Graco and saw the swing in action and took pictures and posted about it on their blogs, and it was just a way to get really great content. Those kind of evolved. So typically when we do those now, like we'll make sure that there's like at least some kind of professional or semi-professional photographer or
right.
videographer there to capture b-roll and some great photos. It's just a way for influencers to meet the brand, to meet other people in their demographic, to bring people together, to talk to them about the product, to educate, to help them to experience it. And there's like different levels at which you can do it.
Like
Um,
activate.
yeah,
But to clarify, in those instances, it's one brand owning it and you're helping curate the event for them.
yeah,
So it's not multiple.
yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned, and this really ties into how we ended the last episode. You mentioned bringing in a parenting expert, right? Because it's not just about like this shooting fish in a barrel, like let's get all these influencers in a room, lock the
Right.
doors, and they're the target for that brand, and now the brand can pitch, pitch, pitch. It's about enriching the bloggers or influencers around the topics that are meaningful to them, which gets back into the whole bigger picture of, do we even understand what influencers are about anymore? And I think we are losing the thread in our industry. But these were influencers who were focused on parenting, focused on their trials and tribulations of small people in their lives that were maybe 0 to 2 or 2 to 4 or da da da. So you brought in a parenting expert, you brought in the brand who maybe has those connections or can support it financially, support this get together, so that the people in the room, the bloggers, influencers, walk away with new information, better information, inspiring information, things that will help them do their work
Yeah, there
better.
has to be something for them to take away. So even, and it doesn't always have to be a parenting expert giving a speech on why swings are great for babies' development. It could be like, I remember we did one for DMI, which is dairy management, and we wanted to show all the ways that you can cook with dairy
Hmm.
back then, like in the mid 2000s. Do you remember there was a company called Super Suppers? There were a few
Yeah.
different ones like that. So it
Yeah.
was like you would go and you would go with a whole group of friends and it's like a commercial kitchen and you prep all your meals for the week. Or
Right.
like you prep a bunch of meals in advance and they all go in the freezer with reheating
Yep.
instructions.
And a
And
bottle
so,
of wine.
yep,
So the first meal you prep is fine. The last one, all bets are off.
right,
Who knows what that
exactly.
one looks like?
Yeah. So we did one of those events with Super Suppers and we invited a bunch of bloggers from the area. We had people from the client there to just hang out and interact. All the recipes included dairy in various forms, and we got lots of great photos. And it
Hmm.
was just like it's just a fun way
Right.
to build like I keep hearing from clients that they love the content that's being created and they love the fact that we help them organize everything and do the recruitment and manage everything and get them the metrics, but they miss having they want to have a connection with these people, especially the ones who are creating content for them multiple times. And how do they have
Yes.
that? They create that connection. I just feel like at the end of the day, the best way to create a connection is to actually bring people together in
Yes.
real life.
Yeah. We hear that a lot from clients too, the push pull when they bring us in as an agency, but they say, we want to own the relationships. Well, that sounds powerful and strategic, but owning the relationships requires a lift. Like, what does that mean? You
Mm-hmm.
have their email addresses? Fine, go for it.
Yeah.
But to your point, and this is a trend, it's not a trend. This is, I hope, where we're evolving as an industry is you're talking about community building,
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
building, community building. And why shouldn't the brands be central to that? I think that's very smart. I want to go back to what the topic at hand could be. I was just mentioning in our pre chat the first blogger event that I was invited to, even pre agency date. In fact, it's where the idea for my agency originated. I was invited to this, it was a food blogger retreat. And I remember one of the speakers was Kim Redden, and I'm going to call her out because she's a doll and I love working with her, from the National Onion Association.
Okay.
Now, I'm a cook. I'm a home cook. I'm adventurous. I make my own pasta and corn tortillas. So, like, I would be the target audience for this. But I was like, oh, how bored. Like, who wants to learn about onions? It was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was fascinating about how they grow and how they know when they're fully mature because the stalks lean, I might be getting this wrong, the stalks lean over. And did you know there are two types of onions, spring onions and fall onions? And the spring onions have more moisture. So caramelizing those is a bitch. You should use the dry onions, storage onions, they're called. I might be, again, getting all this wrong. So anybody can be an interesting speaker depending on your target,
Yeah.
influencer, blogger. Now, Danielle, let me ask you this, and I don't want to take us too far off topic, but the reason I believe those days were successful with those types of experiential events is we had long form content. We were talking to people who were creating on blogs. They were really delivering what we would call now maybe anchor content
Mm-hmm.
versus social media, which is a quick hit and very ephemeral and, in and out. And now because of the For You page and the algorithm, it's more about discovery than following or audience.
I think there's a way to do it. We're working right now to organize a big event for one of our clients. It's going to be in May, and we're bringing 6 influencers to this. It's like a 2-day dairy boot camp that we're doing, and there's going to be like a fun cooking kind of chop type
Yes.
thing. There's going to be some meetings. There's going to be a farm tour. There's going to be an amazing dinner. There's like a whole bunch of events are planned all around dairy and happy cows. And we're, you're right. Like if you just end up with a reel from each person, I think, you don't have the SEO anymore from a blog post. But there's things you can do to make that content longer lasting. So we are bringing professional videographers to capture B-roll. We're going to be creating a big sizzle reel from the whole event. We're going to be
Right.
packaging stuff up. Like, think, yeah, like there's something missing, I think, because we don't have necessarily, I mean, a lot of food bloggers obviously still have blogs, but that's not really the focus right now. But I think there's a lot that's been gained. I mean, I think back to some of these early, we were just talking about Flickr before we hit record. Like, I have that whole Super Suppers event in my Flickr. Like, I
Hmm.
still have the photos, but I mean, imagine if we'd had video, like, no one was taking video
Right.
of
And
those
you're making
things.
a really interesting observation that we might have in those early days leaned into the long form for the power of its presence in long tail format. And now we just have to replace that with a smarter, more robust media
Yeah.
strategy,
Yeah.
right? Of rolling out content intentionally versus relying on that anchor content to be what people point back toward, the influencers point back toward and gaining. Because, yeah, so that's a really interesting way to think about that. I'm going to put in a plug. I hope long form content starts to make a comeback. Substack, Medium, because influencers need to have their own spaces. They need to own their mediums and their channels. Different conversation for a different time. But I love, no, do I get an invite to any of these things that you're planning? Because they sound awesome. I love the chopped, like, experiential, roll up your sleeves, let's have fun. And then the
Yeah.
influencers get to connect and engage and like bounce off of
They're
each other.
super fun. I'm trying to think of some of the other fun ones I've done throughout my life. We did an awesome one. I will remember this forever. We brought a bunch of parenting bloggers to Craft
Mm.
headquarters, and we did a whole chopped thing like in their test kitchens, and they had a bunch of different craft products, and everyone was broken up into teams and can make all the food. And then they brought in the head of R&D
Oh,
to have like a roundtable discussion with moms.
nice.
Like, what do you want to know about what we're developing? What do you like? What don't you like?
Hmm.
And I still remember, I'm not going to call her out. Like, I'm still connected with her on Facebook. One of the bloggers like laid in to the head of R&D about Lunchables. Boy, did she hate Lunchables and everything that they stood for.
Okay.
But
I
it
can
was a
see that
great,
being, yeah.
I mean, I think the head of R&D was like you don't, like, we always hear from moms who love them because they're easy. Like, what don't you like? How can we make that better? Like, they
Such an
love
opportunity for the
the
R&D
the
guy person.
executive loved the conversation. The blogger felt heard. They were
Yes.
like, we're having this at the headquarters, sitting in the test kitchen. Like, it felt meaningful. It was
Yeah.
awesome. That was a great one.
I want to pause and highlight a couple of things that you said. So, anybody listening, brand or agency side, has some takeaways from this because you don't have to do that whole package to get value from what you just said. So, for instance, having an ask me anything with the R&D person on a Zoom call could be an easy stepping stone into more connectivity with influencers and a brand.
Mm-hmm.
You could do even, well, let me just stop there, but there are just so many opportunities. We might have talked about this before. In our campaigns, we repackage or we package the insights in such a way and then encourage our clients to share the wins from the campaign with members of teams that aren't even social facing, aren't even marketing facing, like R&D, the production line, the truck drivers for the product, the shipping, who customer service, answering the phones, whoever, because these people are working day in and day out for this brand to be successful. And they don't, like the R&D guy, they don't necessarily hear the wins. They only get the letters of complaint or the phone calls when a package product doesn't meet their satisfaction. So when you can share the wins from the consumer lens, I think it's a moneymaker in the sense of talent satisfaction and retention and employee satisfaction and job satisfaction and productivity and all of that. So
You know who does
you
a great
just,
job of that? The commodity boards that I know we've both
yeah,
worked with do a really good job at that because the farmers are the ones supplying the fund marketing dollars
right.
to the marketing team. And
Hmm.
just because of the way that they're structured, there's like this built-in structure to report back to the farmers
Hmm.
on what the marketing is doing. And I've been a part of a lot of, like, I've presented to mushroom farmers and taught them about Facebook. And
Yeah.
I talked to dairy farmers last year and showed them a Twitch campaign
Yeah.
that we did,
Yeah.
like building a
Yeah.
dairy farm in Fortnite, and like to, and the sizzle reels that we're creating for the boot camp, those will be shown to the farmers who are funding these
Mm,
initiatives. I think that
yes.
non-commodity corporate America could learn a lot from how some of these commodities work, because the people who are the source of the dollars for marketing are getting really great reports back, as showcasing what that's doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up commodities, because one of our earliest and one of the experiences that I loved doing year after year was with the Produce Marketing Association, where when Twitter was a thing and Twitter parties were a thing, we would take groups, a team of food bloggers, not even food bloggers. We would vet from a bunch of different niches to their annual produce expo and show floor. And we had sponsors that were more branded, like a Sunkissed or a Sunmade, names you'd recognize, and some smaller names that you might not recognize. But we also just scoured the show floor for new produce, new varietals, new what do they call it? Like packaged salads and value added products and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But what was always so interesting, and is still interesting, is in the agricultural world, oftentimes the farmers and distributors are very traditional. So they've got combines and tractors that are GPS guided, like state of the art. But when we would introduce them to Twitter, they were like, what now? Who? What is this? They had no Twitter handles, no Facebook back in the day. This was 2013 and on. So to bridge that gap, I agree with you. I've seen so much traction in bringing that community sort of up to speed with what's possible digitally, socially, excuse me, with influencers. But another great example of experiential too, of taking bloggers out to cover fancy food show, National Restaurant Association, which is called something else now, I think, CES. If you can get
Expo
influencers.
West. There were so many influencers at Expo West a couple of weeks
Yes.
ago.
And the trick is helping those industries and centers of influence. I forget who puts on Expo West, but they got savvy about it a few years after we started doing the trade show for the PMA. Having those centers of influence understand, getting influencers on the show floor, what that looks like, what it means, how it helps. You're already putting so many resources into this event. Why not also then create a megaphone to consumers about what's happening? Like, pierce the bubble. And it doesn't take many more resources to amplify it.
No, not
I
at
love
all.
that. Yeah, there's so many of those. The confectioners and the
Yeah. So
DBA or whatever.
I once spoke at the National Seafood Expo. I mean, there's something for everything.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought it would be interesting to touch on are these, like, kind of over the top fancy events, like the Tarte trip that happens every year. Because I think a lot of brands think influencer event and they think, I can't afford to take 10 people to Bora Bora and give them each a Louis Vuitton filled with my products.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that what people will get out of this, what marketers will get out of this conversation, is that, like, it doesn't have to be Bora Bora.
Right. It's not the haves and the have-nots. There's a lot of middle ground.
Like, for the right audience, a farm in Minnesota is
farm tours.
Amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
Farm tours, again, from our days back with the PMA, we know that agritourism is huge. I will say this, though, there are a set of guidelines that you probably adhere to, I know you do, when you're bringing these 6 food influencers together, about how to make that a seamless experience for them, but also an enthusiastic yes from them, right? Because there are a lot of, in this middle ground between Bora Bora and we're not going to do anything, there are some places where it can be easy to run afoul. For instance, pre-COVID, I saw a lot of invitations for influencers, let's say in the New York City area, to come to this restaurant opening or this launch event, And the influencers are like, I live in the outskirts of New Jersey. I have a family. You've invited me to a 1-hour event with no transportation, no plus one, so my spouse can't come. What is the draw for me here? So I think there's etiquette there to understand.
Yeah, you have to. We helped with a spicy book event last summer. So it was just for, I have a personal pet peeve with spicy books, like calling it that, like it's erotica. Let's call it what it is.
Or as my daughter likes to call it, smut.
Yeah,
It's
it's
smut.
smut. Anyway, there was an event for this in the LA area. Well, I mean, even if you don't live in LA, you know LA traffic. Like just saying something's in the LA area, it could be a 2.5 hour drive for someone to
Yeah,
get there.
for
And
10
there was a
miles.
lot of conversation about like, okay, what's the, like we have to have it after hours because a lot of these influencers have day jobs. But then, like for the after hours one, the ones who are moms, they might have to get childcare. We have to pay for Ubers for some of them, depending on where they're coming from. There's no real great public transportation in Los Angeles.
Mm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that goes into, like, to your point, making it worth their while,
Mm-hmm.
making it make sense, having that kind of value. And, like, if there's not going to be enough value to just get yourself there, making sure you're paying to get them
Right.
there.
Right. There is hidden friction, if you haven't done this before, that you'll run into as a brand or agency planning this. And that friction can be detrimental to the outcome at the end. And we've certainly had prospects and even clients who have really rose-colored glasses, excuse me, rose-colored glasses on when they think about what they're planning, even if it's an online thing. Like you've had this happen where a client will, we're going to run a giveaway. And to enter the giveaway for $500 gift card to our product, brand, whatever, we want a 5-minute video submission. You're like, who is going to stop? Like no, nobody's going to do too much barrier to entry, too much friction. And the same with like, I think often we have to, you and I are in the unenviable position of being the dream killers for our brand partners who are like, they are bought, drank the Kool-Aid. They bought in, they love their product. They think everybody else will. And there's just so many other hidden barriers and costs to coming to a live event.
Yeah. But
Yeah, and
that's
add
why
to it, influencers don't necessarily like to be in person. Some of them, like
some of them
some of
do.
them,
Some of them want to be in their basement. But
right?
like I think taking this all back full circle, I think some of this is why there's something so nice about this simple house party type
Yes.
thing. I
Yeah.
was just remembering back to the good old days of Obama's first inauguration, and we did this breakfast across, we did 5 breakfast inauguration viewing parties for
Yes.
Quaker Oatmeal.
Mm.
And we brought, we had
Yep.
host bloggers. We had one in Anchorage, Alaska. We had one in Houston. We had one in St. Louis.
So every time zone was covered.
Yeah, there was one in Chicago that I was able to go to, but I organized all of them. And the bloggers we hired to be the hosts invited their friends, and we had caterers doing like an awesome oatmeal bar, like with all the different
Yes.
toppings and stuff. And everyone had the Quaker oatmeal guy on a stick, and they were holding it up and taking photos.
Yes.
And
when you think back to that, how much more powerful these days, because like you said, we weren't doing stories and reels and lives, because we did the same type of activation with Unreal Candy when they first launched at Halloween.
God, we pitched that. You won it.
Yes, and there were several different
Okay.
organizations that came together to do it. But it was so much fun. They backed in a truck to my house and unloaded all this candy, which they wanted me to then distribute to my neighbors to give out. So it was great, and it's top-notch product. But we did these Halloween parties, and I remember at the time thinking, how can we tap the moment, not just the coverage of it later? And now we have the tools to do that, to be
Well, and
live.
now everyone, I mean, I was going to say everyone's an influencer, which we've had enough conversations where I know, okay, Danielle, take a step back, not true. But back then, like if you didn't have a blog, like sure, people had Facebook, but you were reaching like your mom and like the mean girl you went to high school with. It wasn't like a big thing. But now, like I think you can get so much more coverage out of it. Like most of the people you invite probably will have an Instagram, whether it's big or not. Like, I think there's so much more opportunity with those simple events now.
Yeah. And to your point, if you do it the right way and you help them capture, if not craft the content, so they
Yeah.
can enjoy it and know there's going to be content for them to tap into, to share.
That's a
It's,
great point to like
yeah.
set up. Like, that was a big thing. My partner Francesca's really great. Back in the day, she hosted so many of these parties at her house because she has a great space and is just like a party planner. But like, one of the big things is setting up Instagrammable moments is such an
Mhm.
important part of this,
Yeah.
and not like as cheesy as having like a step and repeat that people stand in front of, but having, like, we did something for California Raisins and we had the raisin mascot
Right.
there for photo
Right.
opportunities, and having a cute little display of, you know, cookies, or having
Right.
everything look just
Yeah.
helping to create an environment that looks good. And then I think also just taking, I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's really worth it to at least have a professional photographer or videographer there
Hmm.
to make sure, because if a perfect event is when influencers are having a great time and interacting with each other, and they are going to capture some of their own content, and we're going to make sure that that content is as good as possible. But at the end of the day, like, they want some great pictures of them interacting with someone else. They can't, you don't want everything to be just selfies. It's nice to have some professional
Right.
b-roll and photography to distribute to help with that reel.
Right. It's that delicate balance between, are they the host slash employee of the brand in that moment, or are they able to be the focus, the spotlight on what they're doing that they can share later, and supporting them as much as possible. Yeah, I think I love the idea of heading back toward more of these. And if you ask me, when we were running Eat Right Retreat, which was a food blogger conference, and we had all of these elements, but the influencers, bloggers came in and the sponsors came in, I think what we're talking about in some ways is revisionist history, or like deconstructing that into bite-sized chunks in certain places, like a piece of it happening in somebody's house, a piece of it happening at their local park,
I
or
think there's tons of different, yeah, we've done that. We've done like park gatherings. I think there's so many ways that you can do it. And I think we forgot that this is a really fun, great thing. We don't get a lot of requests for it, but when we suggest it, there's excitement
yeah,
there. And I think they were have this type of thing has always been very effective. And then it went away by need because of COVID. And then I
sure.
think it's come back in ways like with Tarte that just seem overly complicated and are not accessible to every brand.
Right.
But I think I hope we don't. I would like to bring it back, and there's so many ways to bring it back, and it can be so effective, and it doesn't have to be a giant ordeal.
I think one of the things that you and I and our colleagues need to address also with the Tarte, I think the Tarte, the glamorous, the outsized events, and also this reckoning we're having right now with impressions and reach and views and CPMs being the target metric. That can be a place where experiential, smaller, curated experiential events maybe hit the cutting room floor, because brands might be thinking there's going to be a lot of logistics and resources spent and money and time for not much views, impressions, whatever you might. So we're going to have to do a better job of saying, but this is why these are so impactful, and how can you leverage it and make it a longer term hit versus just
Yeah.
this one quick one and done. Because I agree with you. I think it's important. And I've heard going into Nimbus from brands that they are challenged to figure out how to get out of their rut around influencer campaigns looking the same from one to the next, and sort of feeling like they've become complacent. I think
Mm-hmm.
experiential is a huge opportunity there. And what you and I have to be thinking as strategists, what's keeping them from doing that, and how can we reduce those barriers so it's an easy yes? So I think reporting is going to be one of them. I think time and energy and money, thinking that it's, but we're so used to these metrics. How are we going to satisfy these metrics with that experiential event that doesn't quite fall? Like, well, that's why it's not in a rut anymore. That's why you're, breaking the mold. You also have to figure out how to translate that into value for the brand.
Yeah, I think I have faith in us. We can do it.
Yeah. On our next episode,
Yes.
tune in as Danielle
All
and
solved.
Casey. Yes, right. Right. That'll be the next title of this is Solved.
Yes.
The podcast in general just
Perfect.
becomes solved.
Okay. Well, this was fun. Trip down
Good
memory lane.
topic.
Okay. See you next week.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.